Rebellious Studio presents the Mind Body Podcast with your host, Maria Angelova. Hi, Rebels. Welcome to the Mind Body Podcast, your rebellious podcast with me, your host, Maria, where it is all about a strong body, calm mind, healing, and fully living. And today I have the pleasure of having Adrienne Enns from May You Know Joy. And I think the name of her company right there tells us why she is here with us, because even the name of the company makes me smile. Welcome, Adrienne. How are you doing?
I'm so well. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, it is my pleasure and my treat. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Adrienne, you have an amazing story and I can't wait till you dive into it. And even our conversation pre-recording was so great already. So let's get this going. Let people know who is Adrienne. So give us 3 words that tell us a little bit more about who you are.
3 words. Joyful. I would say creative and open.
Okay. Give us a little bit of a background behind each word.
Joyful. Now I have to remember the 3 words.
So many people get caught there.
It's a mental health test. No. Joyful, it's just, and we'll get into my story, but through a difficult period, I learned that I wanted to choose joy for myself. I wanted to invite it into my life and savor it. So even in tough times, I look for the little snippets of joy. Creative, I enjoy creativity. That makes me really happy. And in terms of the work that I do, it's creative, but I also like to think of myself and the people who use my products as creating our lives, right? What intentional things do we want to do to help us create? And an intention I just often go to for myself is to be open, open-minded, open-hearted. We can get very rigid in our ideas, our judgments, right, wrong, the way things should or shouldn't be. And when I find myself doing that, I'm like, there's probably a lot more possible here if I would just be open. So I'm just always trying to remind myself of that and just open to a really beautiful conversation with you today.
Intention is one of my favorite words, because I think when we are conscious and intentional, we can have a very different experience in our life just based on choosing, right? We recently, somebody was on the podcast or Authority magazine, I don't even remember, but she said, sometimes we cannot choose our circumstances, but we can choose how we experience them. And I think that is such a powerful statement because it is so true.
I completely agree. And it's easier said than done. We can just and I know I've spent years of my life just on autopilot. You just think this is the way things are and you're in your routines. And when you pause and think, wait a minute, what intention do I want to set for myself? It really changes things.
Yeah, I do think so too. And based on my personal experience, I will tell you, I am so intentional. I do have my crappy human days.
Yes.
And then I pause and remind myself of, okay, you have a choice to get sucked into this, tornado of emotions and feelings and dig down into a hole, or you can pause, take a deep breath and choose to not react, but to respond to the situation.
Absolutely. Yes, that's beautifully said. And I couldn't agree more.
Very good. Well, Adrienne, I would love for you to share a little bit about your story, because you have a very powerful story. We started talking a little bit about that before the recording, that it's so easy to say, I don't have a choice, I can't make it, to put blame and to kind of go through life unintentionally.
Yes.
And you made a choice to change your life in a big way.
I did. And yeah, I'll just, I'll dive in, but I'll, stay true to a few details, and wherever you want to dive in deeper based on what you think your listeners are interested in, I'm super happy to do that. But the biggest thing that I've had to do is to get sober. So I've now been sober from alcohol for 11 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and I've done a talk about it before, and it's like sometimes like in that first 72 hours, like that's the worst, and so 11 years at that point seems unfathomable. But in a nutshell, I just didn't have coping mechanisms, and that was the one I turned to. And it was also just all around me. It was in my family, in my friends, in my work environment. So, on good days, we did that. On bad days, we did that. And it just, for anybody who's struggled with it, once it becomes a downward spiral, like it's a horrible downward spiral. So I really was in a very dark place, and I did have to go to rehab. I needed people to help me. I could not help myself. And it was I always say like one of the best, worst things I've ever done. I mean, worst because it's terrible to go, and you're just on the doorstep. You're like, I can't imagine what my life is going to look like. I don't know how to cope without this. You're full of shame. You feel physically terrible. It's awful. And you wonder too, like on that doorstep, I remember thinking like, I wonder what all the normal people are doing today. Do you know what I mean? Like, can everybody else cope? And I can't cope. And it was also one of the best experiences because I just got like super honest with myself, and I was surrounded by people who understood it and could guide me through it. And I realized, that I was just numbing out all kinds of things that I just didn't know how to handle, and just because I numb them out doesn't mean they're not there. So the two things that I really took away, and I took away zillions of things, but back to your conversation about intention, I realized how much energy I put into my own self-destruction and just numbing things out that I couldn't handle. So I asked myself, like, what could I do if I use that energy for good? And that was the start of my intention practice, because in the early days, you're fragile, very fragile. So I was just like, what is a simple, nourishing thing that I can do for myself today to help further me along this path? So choosing where I put my energy is something I still live by today. And I'm always asking myself, what am I putting my energy into? And when it's misplaced, I redirect it. So I never get perfect at it. It's very much a practice. And then the other part, back to the joy piece, was, I just thought, if I'm going to all of this trouble to turn my entire life around, then I really want to be happy. Like, I just really want to make joy a priority. And people hear the company name, and they think, oh, you're happy all the time. My kids are like, Mom, if they really saw you, So no, I am not happy all the time. But like, I'm also comfortable with my feelings now. I'm mad, I'm sad. But then I'm always asking myself, like, what will connect me to my joy, even if I'm not joyful right now? So that could be exercising, it could be journaling, it could be having a conversation with someone, it could be going for a walk, it could be texting something funny to my sister. Like, what are the things that are going to recalibrate me? So it changed everything for me. And it is something that I am just incredibly grateful for.
And you mentioned so many great points that, to be honest with you, I think apply to everybody, regardless of whether it's an addiction or you're just stuck in life. I think they apply to us because we are all human. You mentioned, and again, it's something we briefly chatted about before we started the recording, is the toolbox, right? The toolbox of items that can pull you out when you're not feeling your best. And another thing you brought up, I had a client one time, and I think I have shared this. She said, are you always this happy? And I said, no. I said, I am human and I am aware. I'm just a lot more aware of where I am, right? So if I feel sad, what can I do to feel that sadness and to release that sadness, right?
Yes.
I call it, if I get emotionally tangled into something, how do I pause, so that they can objectively look at things instead of being reactive to being the state of being that I'm into, right? And I think
Yes.
that's part of our growth. And I think that applies to everybody, right? Experiencing our emotions and then being intentional to stay grounded through the toolbox that we have.
Yes.
Another great thing that you brought up, the people, the support system.
Yes.
Because again, regardless of what you do, who you are, we need that supportive tribe to, to take us through the day. When we have a crappy day, to be able to have an honest conversation and not feel judged or
Yes.
whatever, or made feel guilty or ashamed or anything like that. And people who can also cheer us. And, sometimes we don't see our little progresses. We just want for the big step. And these are the people who can say, give yourself credit.
It's
So I
true.
think all of those things are so applicable to all of us as human beings. And it goes back to self-awareness and building that toolkit of, I know what to do when I feel a certain way. And I think also allowing ourselves the space when we don't feel our best to say, you know what, I need a moment.
Yeah. And just, I mean, our society is so full of distractions, right? Like, so it is so easy to just, whether it's alcohol or social media or whatever it is, but to, like honor that and just like it all does pass. Like it sounds so cliche, but it will pass, and it's also even like in the name of the company, like it's more like a personal mantra for me, but that like knowing joy, we only know it if we also know the other end of things, right? Like we know anger and grief and resentment, and it's like they're all bundled together. And when we allow for it, but then choose joy, like that's where the magic happens. So, and
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, and I just want to add, like, just because I think I've spoken to so many people over the years too, but is like allowing ourselves to feel joy. I've spoken to so many people, and I would have included myself in that group, who think they're not enough or they're not worth it. It's for other people, or I'm going to feel it when I get the promotion, the house, the relationship, whatever it is. And it's like, if we just start opening to like the simple joys, like we have to allow ourselves to feel it, because otherwise there's going to be something joyful and we don't even know how to connect with it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
it's funny.
you're
so right. And I'm glad you made a point about that, because you're right. We have forgotten how to see the joy and the beauty on the journey. I mean, every day brings a surprise. Not all surprises feel good, and that's okay, because that's just how life is. It's a zigzagging road that you don't know what's behind the curve, and that's okay. And also to the point that you started with, I forget the words that you used, but it's like basically where you were helped you grow into the person you are today.
Absolutely. Like had I not gone through that, and to your point about self-awareness, like just this, like, who am I? Who do I want to be? How do I feel? Like I had just covered so much, like, I guess things that felt uncomfortable to me, but then you kind of block all of the beauty and the creativity and all of that too. So it just made me really honest, like I'm just really honest with myself, with other people. Like it's much easier to show up in life this way than it was that way.
Even on my own journey, when I first started and things were not going, my transition from corporate into entrepreneurship, and things were not going well, it was everybody else's fault except mine. And it took that self-awareness that I say that I turned the mirror and went like, oh, and it doesn't feel comfortable.
Mm-mm.
And it doesn't necessarily feel good. And one time somebody asked me, a client said, how do you forgive yourself? Right? And that's a powerful thing, a powerful question, because the forgiveness to the self is the hardest one to do. And I also think the most powerful to do, because once you get that self-awareness and self-acceptance, and you realize that you're worthy and that you're enough, that's when life unfolds. And unfortunately, for many of us, it's the urgency of very discomfortable situations that place us on that trajectory of self-discovery.
Yeah, your point about the forgiveness, like I was like, oh yeah, because even, when I started sharing my journey more publicly, I was like concerned about my kids, and what they would think about me. And, like, yeah, you have a whole, and friends and neighbors and family, all kinds of people. But when I came to term, forgave myself. And then I decided sharing the story was more important than my ego. And I also thought, you know what? I want my kids to know that I'm not perfect, that I've had struggles. And I want them to know if they're struggling or their friends are struggling, that they can come to me and that we can talk about things and move through things together. And I was like, then I'll just be an example of like, you fall down, you get up, and you just do your best. And when I started sharing the story, like nothing bad happened. People come out, everybody has dealt or is dealing with something. And to your point about just being honest and vulnerable, and for the people who can't hack those conversations, then we're not meant to have those conversations right now. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything, but yeah, you just really need to be true to yourself. And yeah, that forgiveness piece is just like, I feel like you just make it better by just taking proactive steps, like not being defined by your worst moment, but just being like, okay, how can it is what it is, and what am I going to create out of that?
And I love that. And I also wanted to ask you, creativity. That's to me, that's a very, what's the word? Very great way to self-care for yourself. Allow yourself the space to just be and to create whatever it is, right? And you don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be a talented poet or anything like that. It's just to be creative, to throw little flowers on a piece of paper or whatever it is. In your case, you took creativity to a whole new level.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that and how creativity played in your journey of transformation into sober?
Sure. So yeah, as part of Made No Joy, we have now a wide product line of affirmation cards. And there was a card deck that just really inspired me in my early days of recovery. And again, in the spirit of like just doing one small thing, I would pull one in the morning. And it just made me think about things like these are just things I had never thought about, And so it's like, oh, this is just interesting. It's inspiring. I'm going to look at things in new ways. So I wanted to create one based on my journey. And what I really love about them is like for ours, they are all different, but no matter so a different theme might resonate with you or a different color, but really all roads lead back to the heart. So whether it's self-care or gratitude or recovery, I like them because they're beautiful, they're inspiring, and I really want, like you teach what you need to learn, right? Want to remind people and myself that it's the ultra simple things that we do all the time that really add up. So it's not always transactional, like I'm going to take care of myself. Sometimes I don't instantly feel better, but it's this accumulation that really has an effect. And I just think sometimes we think self-care or self-improvement might not be the right word, but has to be big and it has to be complicated or what have you. And it's all of these simple things, but also not just thinking about them, doing them. That really, really make a difference. So I love creating the cards and creating something very beautiful, very easy for somebody to incorporate in their day, but also that can have just this incredible effect. And then the beautiful part is lots of people gift them, to friends going through something. So I kind of get to be a conduit of that, like we're writing the cards of people who are sending things. I'm like, this is just so, people are kind and this is all helping. So it's just a really beautiful circle.
I like it. And you know, like with the type of stuff I do, it's the same thing. I mean, I do think self-care and embracing self-care for a lot of people is a journey of transformation. And I
Yes.
always tell them it's small, consistent steps. And I have an article that we wrote with a client of mine who was going through injury. And she was shocked when we started working because her homework would be these little exercises. She didn't have to do like an hour routine or anything like that. But today we're mobilizing the foot. Today we're mobilizing this. Today we're mobilizing that. She was like, wow. She's like, I have never like experienced such an approach that has such a healing effect on the body. But to your
Yes.
point, it's nothing huge. And it's, you know, like in the case of an injury, you start small baby steps, but regular baby steps. And you start seeing over time, you start seeing that beautiful progress that happens. And I'm glad you brought this up as a reminder to all of us. Actually, in mindset class last night, you know, we were talking about that consistency, small steps, and discipline. I threw that one in there.
Yes.
And then action. Your action is key, because if
Yes.
there's no action, you won't see any results.
I was just going to say the same thing, because we can think it, or I've seen too thousands of people pull these cards and say something like, oh, that's so easy. And I'm like, well, why don't you do it? You know, and it's that doing part. And I'm not saying it in a, I don't like the wrong way, but it's just like, you can read it, but just
And I'll
help
tell you,
yourself out, you know?
I've always been a fan of reading like inspirational quotes and such. But now when I read a quote like that, it resonates with me at such a deeper level.
Yes.
I literally stop and like really think it. Like in one of the Authority magazine interviews, somebody had put a quote and I was like, wow. I literally, I kid you not, read it like 5 times and was like, this is profound. But if you just read through it, it won't have the same effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, and you know, sometimes you can take those little messages, and if you really tune in and relate them to yourself, if you really think about it, sometimes in class I you know, we do journaling, and I
Yes.
tell people the time that's devoted to journaling, please don't take your phone and start doing anything else because you're finished. Just the time that's for journaling, just stay over your journal. And if you don't know what else, just write words, write whatever you want to do, but you cannot do anything else because it's so easy to get distracted.
It's so easy. That's where also, even before we hopped on here, like like a ton of notifications on my phone. I really love putting it away. I mean, I do like I'm just as easily distracted by it. Like it's far from perfect, but yeah. And also to notice when you're distracted, because you're usually going to, again, to like avoid something, right? So, you know, like what are they avoiding about this gap in the journaling? And they may not even be aware, but just stay with it is a really beautiful thing.
Intentional with it.
Yes.
Adrienne, let's see, do you have a favorite quote or a piece of advice you would like to share with us?
I think just back to what I said earlier is I just think, you know, yeah, in this world, just looking for like the simple joys every day, you know, is just a really beautiful practice. Like just remembering what makes you happy and then just like noticing, I'm just pointing here, I feel it in my heart, like just how it feels in your body. And yeah, because even through really difficult times, there's always some joy there. And I think our world needs not this Pollyanna positive, but like real authentic joy and like gratitude for that joy. So I encourage people to just reconnect with that.
Yeah. I always tell people, because my training goes through the body. So what do you experience into the body? And once again, funny enough, last night in meditation, we played with words, and I told, because sometimes people say, well, that doesn't affect me. Yeah. And I was like, well, let me tell you a word and you just feel how that feels in your body. So one word and then feel another word, like a low vibrational versus high vibrational word, feel what happens into your body. Because when you experience joy and that energy that's rushing to you when you're joyful in the smallest thing, watching your pet like sit there and gaze at the sun or at the squirrel outside. You can find
Yeah.
joy to that. It does not have to be anything grand.
And you raise a really good point too. Like joy is a word that just really resonates for me. Like it just is something I want to connect with. It's something I prioritize. But to your point, for the people watching or listening, it could be any word that gets them in that heightened state. Like they're the expert on themselves. So if joy is not the word, maybe it's love or bliss or peace, or I'm sure you have a lot of words from your meditation last night.
Yes.
It could be anything. It does, like we don't have to be so
But
limited.
yes, that's right. All right, Adrienne, I'm going to ask you, what is your definition of rebellious?
I was thinking about this. I like, to me, my most rebellious act was being really honest with myself, like it sounds counterintuitive, but I was, going through life, numbing things out, doing everything I thought I was supposed to be doing. But inside, I was miserable, And so when I cut out all this numbing and really just got honest with myself, was kinder to myself, was gentler to myself, like that felt rebellious and like the most healthy thing I could do all at the same time.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting what things we consider rebellious? Because even though it sounds so simple and so makes sense, how far away from that we have gotten as a society.
Yeah, like I was rebelling against this life I thought I was supposed to construct, I don't know. And yeah, like I said, it that shouldn't be rebellious, but
Yeah, no, I
anyway.
understand.
Yeah.
As we're wrapping up, do you have anything you would like to tell to somebody who is going maybe through the same stuff that you were going through 11 years ago, and that they don't know what to do, don't know who to go to, don't know where to start? Any message that you want to send to those?
Absolutely. First of all, like I get it. And there are so many, like we were talking before this podcast, there's so many voices for all kinds of recovery. Like there's not just one way to do this. It doesn't have to be something, for me, it did need to be drastic. Doesn't always need to be drastic, but so many great podcasts, Instagram accounts, just to start following and getting these ideas. But I think the most important thing is that you're not alone. Like, and also now, like, especially post-COVID, this is a massive, massive problem. And the thing that I actually never would have believed is that life on the other side of it is actually way better, way more fun, way just bigger and better in all possible ways. So you think that you can't cope without these substances. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes the physical withdrawal, like the first few steps, are terrible. Like you feel way worse before you feel better. But, surrounding yourself with good people, good community, good resources, like there is incredible life on the other side that at the time when you're in it, and depending who you're surrounded by, you actually just can't imagine is possible.
And I think, Adrienne, that is like the perfect wrap, because this was intended for people who are struggling perhaps with addictions.
Yeah.
That is so applicable for anybody who is going through a journey of things don't feel right? When you're here, you can't see the light up here. You just think it's going to be that constant darkness.
Yes.
But, my journey was different than yours, but it still felt like this before it came up. And it's the same thing. Life on the other side is so much more beautiful, fulfilling, free, happy, joyful, peaceful, whatever you want to, whatever choice of word you want to label with it.
Yes.
It's possible. I think that's the big message.
It is possible.
Yeah. Adrienne, where can people follow you? Buy the cards? Where can they find you online?
It's all May You Know Joy all the time. So the website is May You Know Joy, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Pinterest, all of those places. Like, just again, too, like if you just need daily inspiration, I'm always pulling cards, or other people are pulling. Like, I love when other people pull their cards and I share them. So and just finding, yeah, your whatever resonates with you, and just including those little like micro doses of joy in every day.
Adrienne, thank you so much for being here with us
Thank you
today.
for
I wish
having
you
me.
continued success, and I'm definitely going to get some of those affirmation cards to check them out because I love inspiration all around me. Appreciate your time. I wish you continued success in all that you do. And you guys, thank you for listening, and make sure that you make it a rebellious one. See you next time. Can't get enough of those rebellious conversations? Do make sure you subscribe, like, and share.